great.
I was scrolling and I was like, it just goes on and on. I don't have any news, so it's good that you have plenty.
Just go,
We're gonna be set for
yeah.
news on tonight's episode, and we are live here to chat about nothing but news for Natara. Just kidding. We will have a lot of news, but Kate's gonna take us through like hyperspeed on it, and then we're gonna be able to talk about Only Murders in the Building and Agatha all along. And I'm so excited because we got so much to talk about. What you just missed off camera was me yapping for like 15 minutes straight about the Golden Bachelor, Golden Bachelorette franchise. So everybody can be really excited about the fact that you're not going to have to listen to that tonight because I already got it out of my system. So we can talk about the stuff that you all actually care about. Kate and Carey, I'm so excited to have you here tonight so we can take a break from this awful, gloomy, cold world that's turning into fall and talk about all the fun TV shows happening right now. Do you bring me any news?
I bring a lot of news. So, in a follow-up of what we talked about last time, there's a lot of Jane Austen adaptation news. And there's a lot of, and I kind of divided it into 3 categories. So, I'm going to rapid fire what that all is. So, all on Netflix, there is Pride, which used to be an HBO production, and now it's coming out. It is I think it's based in Brooklyn, but it is a book adaptation coming to screen, very, very strongly based on Pride and Prejudice. There's the Pride and Prejudice one that was recently announced that is a series on Netflix written by Dolly Alderton, a popular author. Haven't read her stuff, but heard good things. Daisy Edgar Jones is in talks for being on that, but it's also such early days, we don't know. The Netherfield Girls is supposedly still in production for Netflix, but it's been in production since 2021. So that one may be on the chopping block because I do have to say 3 productions, all based on Pride and Prejudice, all coming out of Netflix. I can't imagine all 3 of them are going to survive to the screen. And I'm going to be honest, I think that the Netherfield Girls is the most likely to get chopped. On kind of a more positive note, though, there is 2 productions that are coming out that almost are guaranteed. So there's the Other Bennett Sister on BBC, which was talked about. That one's supposed to be coming out sometime next year, I think it is. Yeah, next year, because it's going to be airing on the 30th anniversary of when the 1995 BBC version came out.
Oh,
They also have Miss Austen coming out. I don't have a date for it. It's supposed to be on Masterpiece. I heard about it late last year. It looks like the production's all finished. I just can't find anything about when it's supposed to be coming out. And then they have 3 other things that are supposedly in production still. I can't find anything saying that they're not in production. This is kind of actually a list I found from a fan site about Jane Austen. So, take that as you will, but ITV is apparently still trying to produce a dark Pride and Prejudice series, but they started producing that in 2017. I heard about it back then. It sounds good, but I have no idea if it's going to happen. Longbourn is a spin-off book, and they're trying to make that into a movie. And Lost in Austen was a TV series, and they're trying to make a movie for it. So we'll see if any of those or all of them come to fruition. In a whole different universe, there is Critical Role news. I'm not going to
pause.
Yes.
Regarding all of the Austen news, we have to be entering like an Austenian renaissance. Like what happened with all of like the superhero stuff is now happening with like Jane Austen and Jane Austen-esque stuff, and I couldn't be more happy. As somebody who also like ate up all the superhero stuff with a spoon, this is like even better, ? And we had like an intermediate renaissance of like mysteries. We talked about that when we talked about Enola Holmes and some of those, but now we're entering, I think, like true Austenian drama, similar to what was the one that we were like really into there? Not the Renegades, or was it the Renegades? One where it was like American girls that went.
Oh, the Buccaneers.
The Buccaneers, yeah. That kind of vibe too, Bridgerton kind of vibe, all of that is sort of sitting in this Austenian world, and I'm so excited about it. Okay, continue, sorry.
Yeah, cool, awesome. No, great. So I was going to also mention Critical Role news. I know we're not all Critical Role fans, but I just wanted to tell you this part because you'd find this one interesting. They've announced like 6 or 7 live shows starting next year.
Fun.
And one of them will be a wedding episode, another wedding episode, because they've already had a wedding episode. And the details of the previous wedding episode was it Vex and Percy. Vex, mind you, was played by Laura. This new wedding episode is going to be Jester and Ford, who Jester is played by Laura, and Ford is played by Travis, her real life husband.
Oh,
That is just awesome to me.
that's
I
so
love that part of
cute.
it.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah. Right on the tails of that announcement, we also got confirmation that Legends of Vox Machina has been greenlit for season 4, and that they've gotten some new promising news from Amazon Prime about the other shows that they're making and some
Mighty
miniseries and
Nine or
movies.
something like that.
Yeah, the Mighty Nine, and there might be a like miniseries or movie about the Calamity, which if you've seen this new season of Vox Machina, you've heard a little bit more about. If you haven't, you
Haven't
will.
yet. Well,
And then yeah, and then you did mention the murder mysteries, and I just saw something about there is on Masterpiece another show based on these 3 women, kind of a variety of age ranges, called the Marlowe Mysteries. I haven't really read anything about it. I just saw about it, but it looks cute. It looked kind of like very peaceful Masterpiece murder mystery drama. So that looks like it might be something we like as well. That is all I have.
that does sound like something right up our alley.
Yeah.
Similarly to how Only Murders in the Building is right up our alley and has been for a while, and I'm waiting for us to sour on it, and we're like still not? Question mark. Great. Carey, do you bring us any news tonight? Did I already ask you that?
Yes, and I have no news.
You know what? No news is good news. The only news I put down is news that I guarantee nobody cares about. Number 1, Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated. The whole crowd boos. I don't care. The WNBA wrapped up. You wouldn't know it because everybody stopped watching and when Caitlyn stopped playing, which is like fine or whatever, but it was great. They went like the full 5-game series, the 5-game for like 5 games because it's like best of 5 whatever, and like it was so back and forth, and there was like overtime and drama, and everybody was so good, and like there was like controversy on the final game, and people have like different opinions, and it was stolen, it was that, it was just like everything you want out of a drama / a sports game, or everything I want out of a drama / sports game. So that's great, and now we have to go a long sad drought without WNBA.
All the best stuff happens in the off season.
Like all the players hooking up. You're right.
All the drama happens in the off season. So yeah.
I'm excited. There'll be like a 3v3 league called Unrivaled, but I don't really know who's playing in it, so I don't really know if I care, but I'm pretty sure if I watch it, I'll like start to care, even if it's like players I hadn't previously like cared that much about. Anyways, I think it'll be good. So apparently I'm a sports girly now. Okay, let's dive into Only Murders in the Building, since we already brought it up, and by we I mean me. We are really, really approaching the end of this season, to the point that we have already seen one murder mystery wrap up, a la Knives Out movie number 1, if you watch that, and we see Saz's murder mystery continue. So my question for you right now is, what are your thoughts on this pacing, on the additional murder that was added this season that's kind of already wrapped? What do you think about it as we're kind of heading into the finals?
Kate, I'll let you go first.
You can go first, Carey.
All right. The Westie murder situation, I don't want to say I was surprised that it was wrapped up. I thought it was an interesting story. What I do feel like, and what I do think is that narrative, that storyline, or those characters will somehow come into play in how this sad situation gets wrapped up too. It just feels like it was too neat and too tidy. I still feel like it's going to play some sort of role in the finale, particularly primarily since the quote unquote gun was fired from over there. There's got to be some sort of connection that we aren't seeing yet, or they haven't brought to the screen yet. So I dig that. I will tell you is two things that sort of caught my attention, and I think we've had this conversation before, and that is about the sort of stakes that we have here when you talk about like murders and solving them and that sort of thing. It's always a sort of situation where they're trying to solve a murder that's already happened. Um, but in this case, and it may have happened in seasons before, but we also have a murder that happened during the course of the investigation. And I thought it was really important and really key that Mabel had that sort of sense of this is kind of a big deal. We didn't do, or she felt particularly like they didn't do enough to prevent Glenn Stevenson's murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't tie all the things together in time, which adds a sort of like weight to all of this. Like, hey, this is a big deal. People's lives are at stake. Not that we didn't feel that way to begin with, but it's sort of like, yeah, it hit home a little bit more than what we've probably normally seen. And then the second thing is, quite honestly, when the reveal happened at the end of the latest episode, there was a sense of dread that I had that Mabel's in this room with this killer, and I'm like, this is a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I like the fact that there is a bit more weight this season, and there
Mm-hmm.
is some legitimate, palpable fear that we have for how um, for the outcomes of our heroes, or not heroes, but protagonists for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I really particularly appreciated about the last couple episodes for sure.
Yeah, I mean, without I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have a confirmed renewal at this point, but even if we do have a confirmed renewal at this point, we are never in a show like this certain that one of the main cast would not pass. Right now, we're being teased, that Mabel's in danger, but certainly any of our trio could get killed off either because the show is ending or because they're willing to do one last season investigating one of the trio's murder. I think, based on what we know of the tone of this show and the direction of this show, they certainly would not be above killing off one of the trio or making one of the trio a murderer. And even though it's funny, and even though the show can be kind of like almost slapstick and lighthearted at times, we're still left knowing that that kind of extremity is a possibility. Kate, what are your thoughts?
Um, I don't even know if I fully agree that it's quite that extreme. I would agree that if we knew or I believed that this was the final season, or we were heading into the final season, that they might pull something like that. Um, or they, I would almost more believe if they did more of a frame episode where they're framing season where they were trying to frame somebody.
Yeah.
But that I don't know. I I think this season has been one of their better seasons, though, about managing stakes and managing danger.
Mm,
Because I think we've talked about it before. I was pretty certain I knew who it was pretty early on,
mm,
and I was still able to feel a sense of danger and fear for these characters whenever they were investigating people who I didn't suspect. Um, I did figure it out pretty early on, and it was the same person who we did see at least commit at least one murder. We
mm,
still are kind of questioning, is this truly who killed Saz? But it's everything is pointing to that. If Saz is even dead, still question mark. Um, but I think they've done a really good job of managing those stakes because they've got so many other things going on that even if maybe you're not concerned totally if they're going to be killed, there's a lot of secrets involved this season. And I think there's a lot of, like with the Westies, it's an interesting thing for them to be brought in, for them to have supposedly been there the whole time.
mhm,
Um, kind of kind of a meta poke at the fact that there are a lot of plot holes within the original 3 seasons, which
mhm,
are fine. It's fun. It's whatever. But it's actually a fun little nod to, hey, we recognize this, and here's some reasons why this would happen. With all of the information we have an explanation for Glenn Stubman's death, and we can see why Marshall, or whatever his name is, would have committed this murder. He had a lot of reasons to, but there still isn't much of a stopgap as to why he would have, like, if it was him leaving all of these hints in earlier seasons, why would it have been him?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's where they're going to connect all the dots in the latest episode, because they tend to avoid trying to make this reveal until the very, very last minute. And they waited pretty, pretty long, but I think they could have waited even longer. So to me, I think there's still one last reveal that they're storing up. That's probably going to happen during the wedding, because of course that's when it's going to happen.
Yes.
And it is going to kind of, whether it be another person or whether it be Saz, who had been attempting to try to save them, and or what else and what have you, I'm looking forward to seeing how they tie that all up, because like they've made such a big point of showing that they know that they're there. They have to tie it up.
Yeah. I like that you brought up this idea of plot holes, because as every new character is introduced, as every new setting is introduced, it's like they've almost intentionally left plot holes throughout to kind of breadcrumb us. And this season, maybe more than ever, they've done that, as you know, they've sort of wrapped up mysteries at this point, and we're left with some pretty I guess plot holes might not even be the right word for it. Maybe loose ends, although they do address it as plot holes this season, which is interesting. But it's sort of, we trade out plot for character, and it harkens back to a conversation we all had earlier this season, where Kate, you were talking about you watch this paying attention to the plot and trying to solve the mystery, and Carey, you were talking about you watch this for the characters, and they sort of do this back and forth, and sometimes they leave us hanging with a loose end on a plot hole, and sometimes they leave us hanging on a loose thread with regard to a character that we never see again, or a character we don't see for a while. So my next question has to do with the characters and the many new characters they've introduced this season to an already full cast that already has folks like Saz and Meryl Streep's character and so on, who had previously been introduced, who are coming back and who are with us. With regard to those side characters, the actors playing the trio, for example, they continue to be integrated into the plot. They are sort of serving a therapeutic element, I feel, this season. So what elements of the side characters, the side places, since the places here are kind of also a character, the building is a character, what about that is working best for you this season as we snowball really big in terms of plot and characters?
Well, it'll be easy for me to say in terms of what's working for me in terms of like character relations and that sort of thing. And I really appreciate the relationship um, between Oliver and Charles, particularly in the most recent episode when they had a really good conversation about their relationship and what it's meant to them and that sort of thing. And um, the craziest thing about all of this is that how their lives are so interconnected now. When 4 years ago they were essentially perfect strangers, and now you can't see them like living without each other, right? So I appreciate that relationship. And the thing that's really sort of interesting to me is to see what they do with Mabel, because she again sort of feels like, obviously, other than taking a considerable and active role in a podcast, she still feels sort of aimless in terms of like other ways, right? Obviously, it was nice to see her actually sort of internalize the fact that she can say out loud that I'm a podcaster, and it's okay to say that. So I appreciated that, but she still doesn't necessarily have a place to stay other than squatting in someone else's place. And so it'd be nice to sort of see her, see where that character goes in terms of like um, sort of getting to a place where she sort of feels a little bit more grounded herself. And I think a lot of that is starting to come out, particularly with the conversations that she's had with Eva Longoria's character, and also with Molly Shannon's character and that sort of thing. So you start to see those things build, and you see that she's starting to feel a certain way about what she wants and how she does it. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that growth for sure.
Yeah. I I don't know if I necessarily have anything that stands out as a positive, more of just things I've noticed. I kind of flip back and forth about how I feel about them using the actors. I
Mm,
think sometimes the actors' relationships, they do, like, I think each actor playing the trio has had a moment where they've said something really, really poignant
mhm,
about the characters. And they've also had really great moments of showing that they themselves do have this investigative skill because of their lives as actors. And I think that they made a good point of, just because they're people that would not be typically considered for a detective type role, they're people who know human behavior and have good insight because of that. I think that's a really interesting thing. But then they also have had moments where I think they've actually detracted, or I think they've distracted from what's going on. So
mhm,
they've had some like positive and negative thing. But I think that's kind of been a thing that they've had throughout all of the seasons. And it's an interesting thing because you pointed out that we've talked about, like, I pay attention to plot. I love characters. I actually really love character driven stories. But I think there is something in my brain that when there's a mystery presented, I like to crack the code, especially when it comes to these really personable, forward mysteries. And what's so interesting is nobody's really pointed out, within the show. I'm sure there's plenty of discourse between us and outside of us, that there's so many characters that integrate really, really firmly into the story, and then the next season they're not there and they're never mentioned again.
mhm.
So characters like every time Mabel has a romance,
Yeah.
all of Mabel,
Cara Delevingne.
Mabel, yeah, Mabel's childhood friends, Mabel's family, like, we know that they exist, but they're never mentioned again. And some of those make sense. I mean, like, if it's a failed relationship that you're like flirting with her and she's moved and whatever, that's fine, like the Cardell. But it's interesting how some of them just crop up, and part of me is kind of thinking, well, obviously, if it's a movie, the production's going to take enough time where technically they'd still be making this movie into season 5.
Yeah.
But then there's another part of me that's thinking they probably won't bring these characters back because that's how this show is formatted, and both is fine. It's just an interesting thing to me, and it does kind of weigh on my mind about it. It affects how much I kind of buy into them as characters
Mhm,
playing themselves who play the trio, which is kind of the layers of that is funny.
mhm.
Um, but I think I don't know. I think I'm interested to see who they kill off at the end of this season and
Yeah.
what the mystery will be for next season. And I think that'll have a lot. I think honestly, who they end up killing will have a lot of effect on how I feel the actors, that trio, um, their effect, their net positive or net negative effect on the show. And I still haven't really made up my mind about it because I kind of keep going back and forth about whether I think it's been good or bad.
I'll posit a I don't know if I'd say theory, just like a prediction. Because you
Mm-hmm.
referenced who they're going to kill off at the end, and then you also
Mm-hmm.
referenced this
Don't
idea
say
that
it.
Saz may not be dead. Stay with
Mm-hmm.
me.
Uh-huh.
Wait,
If
don't say it.
Saz stays dead, if Saz stays dead, I think they will kill off one of the trio.
One of the main trio or the actors playing the
The
trio?
main trio.
Okay.
One of the two men specifically, either
Yeah,
Charles
they
or,
couldn't.
you know, they can't kill off Selena Gomez. Either Charles or, I don't remember names.
I had a thought about when you. I was thinking you were going to say who I'm thinking about that they were
Who?
going to kill off. I'm thinking that, and I don't know why, but I feel like they're going to kill off Loretta. And the only reason I
No,
feel
you
that
might be
way
right.
is because, I mean, obviously, if and when they get married, right? It's,
Mhm.
I guess their relationship would still be long distance, but it's like, if it's not, how
Mhm.
does that get integrated into the next season, right?
Yeah.
So that's my really only thought, because that usually doesn't happen, right? Um, so that's my thought.
Yeah.
because
Basically,
then it
I
would
agree
be
with
that,
you, and I
well,
think like the reason it would be it could be her. Okay, I agree with you. The reason I think it is dependent on Saz staying dead is if Saz is alive, if we get the reveal that Saz is alive, the next death won't be as impactful. So if Saz is alive, it would have to be some kind of twist. It would have to be something where it's not about who died, but it's us seeing potentially Mabel kill them or how they died, or there's some big conspiracy, or it's a plot hole, or a past character comes back. Cara Delevingne appears and she's the murderer. Like something like that has to happen. It would have to be
Mhm.
twisty because we're not necessarily buying into death at that moment because Saz, we spent all season, looking into her murder, but she's alive. But if Saz stays dead, we've got a fairly main character who recurred across multiple seasons stay dead. Now death is meaningful, and it's not going to be about how they killed or who they killed, or who was the killer. It's going to be about who can die in this universe where true death of a main character is possible. And I think they would follow up with one of the main trio, or I'll accept Loretta. That is essentially a main character. I mean, it's Meryl Streep. She's always going to be the star.
Yeah. Um, I have a couple people in my head that could be, on the chopping block. Loretta was definitely high up there. She's had a couple like little moments this season that actually could be breadcrumbs.
Mhm.
The whole thing about how they were hinting at that Loretta was in trouble when Oliver was calling her, and he just took it as like a disinterested, and that prompted a breakup. But as a viewer, you're clearly supposed to think, oh, she's physically in trouble, and then it just be that was her assistant talking on
Mhm.
the phone. That's a funny breadcrumb that they could easily pick up and say, well, this, that, and the other, that's the reason. Um, I think it's Loretta. For some reason, I keep feeling like Howard's about to get killed off, but I agree that if they kill off Howard, Saz has to stay dead because Howard is not high priority enough for it to make
Mhm.
any sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think the only other characters that they could kill off across from the main cast is one of the actual actors, because then it would be more prompting of like now they're investigating a high profile murder.
Ah,
These, yeah, yeah, like these are maybe not. I don't know if I would consider them A-list stars within this universe, but they're definitely famous. And
yeah.
whereas like the other people, I mean, they matter to them, and I mean human life, but it's still like a level of. Then you have the media actually down their throats, and like it that would add a certain element of a twist or drama that they've only dealt with tiny bits of the media before, and that would be swarms of media because of a famous person being killed.
let me ask you this question because I could see that as well, but then I feel like it sort of brings to light one of the show's sort of glaring situations, right? Is that we have these amateur podcasters who are become these murder investigators, right?
Mhm.
Which brings to light sort of like where are the actual investigators in this universe, right? And
That's a
so
good question.
and so if it and I thought about that obviously when Glenn was killed, and I'm like, w- some real legitimate investigators would have been really nice to have as part of all this. And so I'm thinking if it is a legitimate sort of like, at least for that universe, like significant star who's murdered, wouldn't that prompt like actual quote unquote legitimate investigators to basically say you guys need to back off here?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and in previous seasons, I can't remember her name, but it's the detective that's always showing up. I love that character.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, in previous seasons, she's actually had a stronger presence. I think she's only been in one episode, and they basically explained like why she wasn't there. By I think they said it was a case that was handed over to the feds or something. I can't
Yeah.
remember exactly. Which I kind of accepted, and they did have like a couple moments of it clearly having some investigators in Charles' apartment, and then it was completely dropped, which part of me thinks is maybe a clue as to who actually killed Saz or how they were getting access to the Westies apartments. But then there's another part of me that thinks it was simply just because they wanted a reason to keep the detective out of main storyline because of that exact point of like, why is she not here? So I don't know. I don't know that, but I agree that if they do go with a more high profile case, then they would really also have to explain why the cops aren't there. Because yeah, like it's funny, it's a funny bit that there's really no outside investigation other than this one detective. Um, but it's kind of brushed under the rug when it's not these high profile cases. If it was a high profile case, we would definitely have that issue.
I agree. It is interesting because we get to focus on the trio as detectives by having some sort of marginal reference to police and detectives existing, but they have no real footprint in the story. But they're also not like portrayed as bumbling idiots. If anything, they're portrayed as like rational, helpful people, and the trio is somewhat bumbling idiots, or at least they were in early seasons, and now they're portrayed as not. So it is interesting to have them essentially take over the police's job in the way like a murder mystery podcast would, but not show police corruption or police incompetence per se. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead, Carey.
No, I was gonna say it's still continually jarring to me when when they're conducting their investigations into murders that they go and talk to people who they might suspect to be murderers, and I'm like, it's I just have to say it's kind of freaking stupid.
Yeah.
Um, let someone know where you are. Take some. I mean, you're investigating people who've proven themselves capable of taking a life. You may want to take some precautions. That's all I'm saying.
These are not people who would survive to the end of a horror movie. I feel certain. The discussion here of like detectives and police ties in so well to our next discussion of Agatha All Along, which I'm really looking forward to because last time we discussed it, Carey, you and I had dabbled within the Agatha All Along universe. But Kate, this is your first week getting a chance to share your thoughts. And as we said, the show was made for you. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts. I'll kick you off with a question. Kick us off with a question.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point in the season, we are still on the Witch's Road, more or less. But the tone and theme of Agnes as a detective has continued still. So, what mysteries within the entire season, I guess for Kate, because this is your first time talking about it, what mysteries are working best for you at this stage in the show?
Hmm. I don't know. It's one of those things, I'm enjoying the show, but I definitely don't like it as much as I liked WandaVision. I think that, to be honest, none of none of the mysteries have really pulled off what I would say is actually being a mystery. To the point that when you guys were talking about it last week, you kept on referring to Teen as Teen, and I thought you guys were just forgetting Billy's name because I just assumed it was Billy because obviously it was Billy because of the trailers.
Right, right.
And so the entire episodes, I'm like, why are we calling him Teen? He's Billy. It's clearly Billy. Why are we calling him anything but Billy? And that has continued to be a theme of like, well, who put the sigil? I thought that was pretty clear who would have put the sigil. I there's not a lot of mysteries to me that actually are working as mysteries. Um, I think it's more of what it's doing a lot of good things that WandaVision did really well. WandaVision had a lot of mysteries that I do think actually did really well. Maybe it's because of how fast I watched it, maybe not. But I think Agatha doesn't really do the mystery as well. I think it does do the basically analysis of character through traumatic events really well.
Mm-hmm.
It puts all these characters, in their own trials and really shows what they've gone through and kind of explains it in unique and interesting ways each time. And I think that's done really well. I think I really grew to like a lot of the secondary characters because of it. I really liked Jen and I really liked Alice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because I liked how their stories were told.
Mm-hmm. Carrie, what about you?
Um, I guess the mystery that sort of like that I'm still particularly interested in is obviously this is supposedly Agatha's second trip along the Witch's Road.
Right.
And so I'd really love to get sort of a sense of what that first trip was like. Um, and because I get the feeling that either whoever is like the most strongly committed to the Witch's Road, it's sort of a reflection of the Witch's Road becomes a reflection of what it is either that they want or sort of their universe or their world, and it sort of takes that and then extrapolates whatever sort of trial or tribulation you need to go through.
Uh-huh.
But what's interesting in this show is that I had always thought and felt like that was Agatha, right?
Mhm.
But I've obviously seen some sort of post show analysis and that sort of thing. And then obviously looking at the show myself is you sort of start to pick up that the Witch's Road, a lot of elements of the Witch's Road, a lot of elements of the trials that they're going through, even though they're trials for the other witches,
Mhm.
look a lot like the kinds of things that Billy would have manifested. If you look at
Mhm.
his room, a lot of the designs and a lot of the things that are in his room are sort of reflected in the Witch's Road. And so I'm just wondering, this Witch's Road, who does it represent more? Does it represent more of what Agatha's desire is, or has
Mhm.
this always been from the very beginning sort of like what Billy has put in place, knowing that he had to sort of get to this place, and it's all sort of a reflection of his desires and his wants. And I feel sort of obviously with the revelation that we sort of knew all along, to use the title of the show, that this is certainly Billy's story. The only reason we probably refer to him as Teen and not as Billy is we just didn't want to spoil it for you, but everyone knew this from the very beginning,
Okay, cool.
from from like the design of his clothes from the very
Mhm.
beginning. I mean, it wasn't
I
it
think it was
wasn't a
revealed at casting, even like it
yeah
was part
yeah
of.
it, it
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why did the show follow through on sort of keeping it a secret? And um, it, sort of just for narrative things, I guess, more than
Mhm.
anything else. But it wasn't a surprise or a shock. I guess more importantly, people were more concerned about how and why, not necessarily who. And so
Mhm.
I think that's where they landed.
Yeah. And therefore explaining the visual difference that he's sort of inhabiting a body, that
Mhm.
aspect of it. So I'm hearing an interesting situation where the mysteries, the plot, ironically, is not as much working for Kate, but you are interested in the character study aspect that is
Mhm.
mirroring some of the character study in Agatha, whereas in WandaVision, whereas Carey, our character focused person, you are kind of appreciating some of the plot elements and the nods to not necessarily mystery of what, but mystery of how, mystery of why. So with that being said, following the reveal of the teen, we get a deeper dive into William, Billy's character. So, what elements of his storyline are you liking so far? The many references to the existence of his mother, perhaps?
I mean, I've liked his story pretty pretty well, generally speaking. I think I liked the kind of in the beginning of seven, where or six or whatever the most recent episode was, where we find out the confirmation of really how he came to be. Um, and for as much as I like Wanda, I actually really appreciate that his main concern is more for Tommy than it
Mhm.
is for Wanda. I think it would have been a little disingenuous and it would have felt wrong for a guy who because he basically has the consciousness of Billy and William kind of mixed in and doesn't he can't fully distinguish the lines. He and doing all this research, he knows a lot about the history of Wanda, and it's hard to say exactly how the news is being presented to the public about Wanda, but we know that it's not being, truthful. We're not really surprised by that, but it's not being honest about what happened there. But there is some amount of messaging and understanding that something happened, and he has probably figured out that Wanda was at the center of it if he understood that she was there and that he is potentially Billy Maximoff. So I could presume that he has some, maybe not resentful feelings towards Wanda, but complicated feelings towards Wanda. Mm-hmm. That he doesn't know who's at fault, what's happened, and presumably just believes what he's being told, that she's dead, mm-hmm. and that he can't find Vision. So his next best bet is to find Tommy, who presumably is just as innocent as he is in this whole ordeal of whatever happened. So I think I really actually appreciated how much, like, once you get the full reveal of why he's there and who he is, that his main concern is finding his twin brother, who he hopes has gone through the same ordeal of at least being kind of implanted in another dead body, mm-hmm. but also recognizes he probably just wants to help Tommy, because at least he has this magic ability. Tommy's just fast, and mm-hmm. Tommy probably needs even more help kind of figuring out what's going on with the pieces in his head. Mm-hmm. And so that aspect of it, I think I really liked.
Do you think that Billy, as he is now, has any of William's consciousness in him at all? Is he able to access that? And the only reason I ask is because if he does, to any degree, right, at least he would be able to call upon, well, William had or has, depending on how you want to look at it, his parents, right? But he doesn't mm-hmm. have a sibling, right? So that's something that William didn't have, and obviously as a twin, that's something that would be a strong pull for Billy. So I could see, if those two things being the case, certainly why he would feel more passionate about trying to find Billy, and then seeing where everything else lays out.
That's a good
Tommy, yeah.
That's a really good question as to what he has of his host's consciousness and how that will come into play, kind of towards the end. Is he staying in his host body? We would assume so, based on how casting mm-hmm. tends to work. And if so, are we then going to be fully divorced of the host personality, or personality, character, life experience, memory? Or is that going to potentially come back into play? That is a really good question. We technically, there's 3 more episodes. However, there's not really 3 more episodes. There's 1 episode dropping tonight in 10 minutes, and there is kind of a 2-hour finale, essentially, in a week. So by Halloween, these will all be out. And with thinking through how Billy's going to wrap up for the season, how Agatha's going to wrap up for the season, how the Witches Road and the plot thus far and the side characters and Aubrey Plaza are going to wrap up for the season, what do you want to happen? Do you want to dive further into Billy's host? Do you want to dive further into particular side members of the coven? Do you want to dive further into Agatha? What is it you want to see in the really just 2 episodes left, kind of?
I know that there are 2 things for sure I'd like to see. And this sort of goes back to the whole Billy thing. And this is sort of the dark aspect of it, right? It's because whether I personally don't believe that there is anything of William that's in Billy, but the point of that all being is that these folks lost their son. He died that night, and mm-hmm. I don't know. Obviously, the show they haven't really addressed that whole thing, right? And right. So there's a part of me that says that there needs to be some sort of resolution for that, for a family whose mm-hmm. son died. And sure, in the universe, he's a parent. I mean, of course, they don't know that he's lost his memories. But my point being, I hope to see that there's some sort of resolution that says, hey, your son died, I replaced him. I think that conversation needs to happen. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I absolutely positively have to witness in this show is obviously more of Rio and Agatha's backstory, because obviously we all have the expectation of who Rio represents, mm-hmm. and I need to see sort of how they gallivanted around doing the things that they did in the time that they did it. I mean, if nothing else, come on, give me that Dolly Parton Jolene scene, man. We gotta have that, right? You
Agreed.
do know what? Yeah, I gotta see that. Gotta see that.
From the comics.
No. You remember when Billy was looking? He was googling Agatha Harkness, and he was finding all of those incredibly deep and secret
Mhm.
websites. One of
Right.
them had the revelation that they believe that Agatha was the Jolene that Dolly Parton was talking about in her song Jolene.
Oh,
So
yes, I understand. Yes.
yeah.
When
So I
he's
need, I
going
need,
through Wikipedia and it's like
yeah.
Abigail Adams, Agatha Harkness. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
This
So
is
Yeah.
I'd love to see their relationship and how they got to where they are.
the Jolene scene. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, what about you? What do you want to see towards the end?
I was kind of thinking the same thing, that I want some amount of closure or some indication of how Billy is going to continue his relationship with his parents, the other parents, because they could either play it as like he kind of abandons them, um, for his hunt for Tommy and will eventually probably be Wanda,
Mm-hmm.
or they could kind of leave it as, it's the complicated mixed family type deal. And I think that would be a much more interesting thing for them to explore about how complicated that would be, and is similar to how real life situations that kind of mirror this are actually end up being. I think that'd be more interesting. I also would like to actually see some progress on. I don't know if necessarily they'll find Tommy and show who he's going to be portrayed as in this season, but I think that they'll probably kind of end this show with some amount of revelation about either where he's going to find Tommy or what's happened to Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has to have some revelation on that. It's funny, you guys were talking about Rio, and I was expecting a lot more in this episode that we already had, and she actually isn't in it a whole lot. She's kind of just this extra creepy woman that keeps popping up every once in a while, and I kind of like that. But I would like some more explanation and backstory within the show of who she is and why she's so important to Agatha. I also think I would like some further explanation about how the town around like Westview feels about Agatha, because there is some like weird plot holes with like how they were okay with her staying, but they didn't like Wanda, even though like they were both witches, and then the whole Ralph situation. I don't know if like I don't want them to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but I think maybe like one more scene as like they exit the road.
Mm-hmm.
I could see having an extra scene where they kind of she once more has to deal with the
Mm-hmm.
people in that town, especially now that Sharon's dead,
Mm-hmm.
and how I just further context for how people within Westview and outside of Westview feel about the entire event of WandaVision and now this event as well. I think are would be interesting because they kind of talk about it in bits and pieces, but there's never been a full explanation about how everybody knows about it and what they all feel about it. Because we've seen what's happened, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't understand how what everybody else thinks happened and how they feel about it.
Yeah. That idea of like getting back into what the town thinks, I think, is really interesting, especially as they get further into this idea of this being Billy Maximoff, which is intrinsically tied to the town, as the town being a character essentially in WandaVision, revisiting that character. I'm definitely top of my list is more Agatha and Rio. If we have any chance of a second season, obviously there will be more of that to come in season 2. And I would just I like the idea of having in the 2-hour finale some flashbacks to Agatha's first trip down the witch's road. I don't need the first trip down the witch's road to be the entire impetus of season 2. I don't need it to be a whole flashback episode, but some kind of flashbacks integrated into the, what's essentially a 2-hour season finale, I think would be really interesting. Well, we are running short on time. So, what do you all think about 2 rapid fire 1-minute round robins? The first one being what else you watched this week? 60 seconds on the clock.
Mm.
The second one being your woman of the week. 60 seconds on the clock.
That works.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I'm seeing lackluster ascent, so we will plow forward. Um, Kate, would you like to have the first round of 60 seconds? Tell us what else you watched this week.
Oh, little nothing, just Vox Machina. So it continues to diverge greatly from the source material, which is fine. I'm having a good time. It's change is great. It's okay.
Absolutely.
It's fine. Actually, because of how much more source material and how many like miniseries and everything that they have in the universe, they've actually been able to integrate other characters that didn't even exist when they were first telling this campaign, which has actually been a fun twist. We've actually been able to have really good Pike moments and a couple other people because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is also a TV show and not a D&D game anymore, they've also been experimenting with how do they continue to actually have stakes in death.
Mm.
And by that, I mean, bring back Percy, bring him back, he's been dead for bring him back, I need him back. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also been incredibly heartbreaking watching all the emotions of all these characters. I'm excited for how, I mean, their next few episodes are going to drop within a couple hours. I'm really excited to see what happens. I mean, I know generally what happens. They actually, because I said they confirmed season 4, I'm also looking forward to see if they do the full Bard's Lament, if Scanlan does leave, or they save that for next season, and how, like, what all the elements are going to kind of drop and round out for the next thing. But it was good. I still highly recommend it. It's just a lot more different than the campaign than the previous seasons have been. So, dealing with that.
I'm fine with change, she said. The narrator, she was not.
She was not trying to change.
Carey, what about you? Take it away.
I've watched a lot of things, but one of the things that I want to talk about is I've obviously watching the final season of Superman and Lois. One of the fantastically beautiful things about these last 2 seasons is that obviously we've been dealing with mortality, particularly in the form of Lois Lane and her battle with cancer in the last season. And obviously, I don't think it's any short of shock or surprise that we've been dealing with the death of Superman story in the final season. And obviously, we're all sort of aware of the death of Superman story and the resurrection that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've had that, spoiler alert, right? But what I absolutely positively appreciate is that there is still a mortal element to his return.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just, okay, he's returned and it's like, okay, he's back to being super. He has some trials and tribulations that he has to overcome, some things that he's never had to deal with, just like there were some things he never had to deal with in the previous season. And so I like the fact that they give us fantastically established characters with Superman and Lois, but continue to throw them curveballs and fastballs that they have to deal with. And they would only be able to deal with them, and they can only deal with them because this is a Superman and Lois that we've never seen. They've been married for like 2 decades, right? They've been through a whole bunch of things. And we get to see how this family works under the most difficult of circumstances. So that's what I've been watching. It has been fantastic. Side note, I've also been watching The Penguin. Kristen Milioti deserves a freaking award. All of the awards, give her all of them. Absolutely. Watch it.
Okay, so you guys have some great stuff on your plate for this week. I'm about to do a deeper dive into Soups and Low. I just watched the beginning of the first episode, but I'm about to marathon through so I can do a review at the end of the season. I have been loving the latest season of Abbott Elementary. Very similar to Only Murders in the Building, where it's like I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. At what point am I going to have beef with this? At what point am I going to dislike this? I feel the same about Abbott Elementary. At what point is this going to get lame? At what point is this going to get bad? And part of this show, and centers around a romance around Janine and Gregory. And at the end of last season, they got together, and now they're dating. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I don't believe in the moonlighting curse, but like prove that it's not real. Like I don't believe in it, guys, but like just like show me also, that it's not real. And they've had them be together this season so far. It's still early in the season and it's been cute, but there's still, like the hurdles of like planning early dates or, oh, he's a germaphobe, like things that are appropriate for like a half-hour comedy that are just so cute, so endearing. We still have interesting stuff happening around the school with like the new golf course being built nearby the school, which means they're getting like white kids at the school for the first time, which is so funny. Give these writers all the awards. I can't. It's so good. They had like a ringworm episode. I'm not a fan of like skin things, so I'm like, this is it. This is gonna be the episode that I like don't like, but like it was still so good. Can't recommend it highly enough. It is antidepressant drugs. You don't need those. Trust me, I'm a doctor. You just need to watch the show. For legal purposes, that's a joke.
Aren't they supposed to be doing a crossover with Always Sunny in
I
Philadelphia?
I've heard that. I found that like a little hard to believe, but like I think it is true. I also love It's Always Sunny, but like the humor of both shows is like maybe a little different. Also, if you like It's Always Sunny, you definitely want to be watching High Potential. Also, if you like good TV, you want to be watching High Potential. That show is chef's kiss. Loved everything about it so far. Time for our last rapid fire round robin. Carey, I'll start with you for this one. Woman of the week.
I can't remember if I put it in the doc. I may have, right? So I too watched the WNBA finals, all 5 games. I will say this: the games were incredibly hard fought. They were probably
Mm-hmm.
not the most beautiful brand of basketball, but that's
Mm-hmm.
another story. So Leona Bebish,
Yes.
she is a forward for the New York Liberty. She is a rookie on the team. I can't remember or recall if she barely made the team, but here's why she's my woman of the week, right? There are, like in anything in life, you have a team and there are stars on said team, and they may be in a situation where the weight of the world is on their shoulders, and they may not always be willing and able to carry such a load. So in comes a rookie who does not have the weight of the world on her shoulders. She just gets to come in there freely and play basketball. And all she did was basically help this team win the WNBA finals. In the overtime of game 5, she comes out in overtime, hits the first 3-pointer, gets a steal, all game.
Yep.
And so because of that, I always like when sort of the not necessarily the underdog, but sort of the least suspected person gets an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity and time to shine and takes advantage of it. That's why Leonie Phoebish is my woman of the week.
That was a phenomenal pick. Strongly agree. Kate, what about you?
All right. So to kind of go back to Vox Machina, I'll use this time to just talk about previous seasons. I've kind of complained that my favorite character, Vex, just does not get her time to shine. And this season, they're finally giving her a lot more time to be in the focal point. Uh, a lot of that has to do with they've really focused more on the romance this season, but they've also focused a lot more on grief this season, and she's been on the receiving side of both of these issues. And I think it's very well played. I mean, it is animated, but the voice acting is incredible. It genuinely made me tear up. Even again, I know these things are happening, I know what's coming, but it still is very emotional. And I think it's well played. There is a point where she actually makes the decision to avoid and ignore her grief in an attempt to continue to save the world. And then the moment that they are in reprieve and they have made some amount of success and they have won this big battle in the war, she the moment that the soot falls and everything, she just starts to weep, and you can tell what she's crying for, and it's such a beautiful moment. And I think it's such a great character work, even though that they've changed a lot from the original campaign, which again I'm fine with. They've done a lot to really find the elements of her character being, the hard ass and the practical one that really hides a lot of sincerity and emotion and just tender love that she has as a person. And they've been able to kind of reintegrate that back into the show, which was something I was always missing from the previous 2 seasons. And now it's back up in front and center. And I'm really enjoying that they've been able to do that with that character. And it's just really left an impact these past few episodes. So she's my woman of the week.
I love that. Great picks for both of you. I did pick a villain. She is, but I love her, and she's actually never done anything wrong. So I watch a lot of trash reality television shows, and America is not putting out enough of them. So I had to start watching Love is Blind Habibi, which is Love is Blind, but set in, I think it's filmed in Saudi Arabia or filmed near Dubai. I don't really remember, but they're kind of like from all over type vibe. And it's fantastic. I watch it with subtitles instead of dubbing because you really do have to like hear their voice and the tone of everything. And the subtitles are also like not always right, but like that's fine. Not to brag, but I understand it. Anyways, so there's this one character. Her name is Noor, and she is a model. Do I agree with everything she said? No. Did she say that feminism ruined everything for us? Yes. And I don't agree with her. And she sometimes says things that are bad. However, she's really entertaining and she's so pretty. Um, and she got paired up with this guy who is like, um, not what you might picture her being with in real life. And she felt a type of way about it. Anyways, she's just carrying that show on her back. She's so entertaining. She's so willing to be like kind of transparent about the aspects of her personality that would not be received well, maybe in general, but certainly not received well by a Western audience. And she is my woman of the week because I support women's rights and wrongs. And also, did I mention she's so pretty? Oh,
2 times.
yes. You said 2 questions?
No, I said there was 2 times that you mentioned it, so it must be true.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you had 2 questions. Yeah, no, it's very, very much true. She is chef's kiss and entertaining. And if you are beautiful and entertaining, I feel like legally you don't actually have to be good. Anyways, she would probably agree with me on that. So watch Love is Blind Habibi is what I'm saying. You can fight with me, Kate, or Carey by going to our information in the description down below and talk to us about any of our opinions on the shows that we talked about tonight. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Kate and Carey, for chatting with me about all the great TV that we're watching this week and some of the not great TV that I'm watching. And I will see you all in probably 2 weeks to chat about the end of Only Murders in the Building and the end of Agatha All Along. We will have finales for both. It'll be crazy. And also all the other stuff we're watching between now and then. Bye.